Welcome to Crying Out Loud. I'm Dr. Laura Berman, and this is your grief companion. Join me to learn how to soften the pain, steady the nervous system, and connect to your loved ones on the other side. None of us were meant to grieve alone, so let's cry out loud together.
So I'm crying out loud, I'm not holding it in, I'm shrinking my heart.
John Onwuchekwa, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah. Oh, honored to be here with y'all.
I'm grateful. And, you do so many things. You're a pastor, a community builder, a creative, a storyteller, a writer, a grief advocate. I don't know if I was listening to you. I took a really deep dive. I've been following you for a while, but when I knew you were coming on the show, I took a really deep dive into some of the content you put out. And, I was chuckling to myself in solidarity because you were saying that you recently realized you had ADHD, which is probably why you do all these things, right? When your
Listen,
daughter got.
yeah, yes. That diagnosis changed my life. Made so much sense of everything that's going on in my life. Yeah.
Yeah, when my first son got diagnosed years ago, the same thing happened to me.
Yeah.
But, it sort of helped you, I'm sure, recharacterize how all your different interests kind of fit together.
Yeah.
And so can you just, I just want to kind of get a sense. I know I just summarized a bunch of the roles that you're in, but like who you are right now, not just like what you do, but what season you're in. And, let's just kind of come into the space speaking from that perspective. And maybe it's all of it at once.
No. This is good. And I'm glad that you asked that because one of my least favorite questions in the world is what do you do, right? Where when you meet somebody, it's the first question that they ask you, or it's the first question that you get asked after somebody asks you what your name is.
Yep.
And it is such an uninteresting question that tells you absolutely nothing about a person other than how they get paid and the frequency of what they get paid, right? So it is like, why do you do what you do? And so for me, anybody that knows me knows for me, like at my core, I'm a storyteller. I just have a deep belief that the lives that we want, the virtues that we most desperately want to cultivate to change the world that we're in, are transferred through stories. And so from that standpoint, it is just me saying, I am a storyteller and I just want to use my communication and my speech and my life to help people hold on to hope, to remind people that tragedy doesn't ruin anybody. Hopelessness does, which at its core is, all good stories are really trying to drive that truth home. So, yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And your storytelling, there's so many beautiful metaphors that you use when talking about grief and loss. We'll be getting into some of them that have stood out to me. I'm sure there are many, perhaps others that will come up during our conversation. But, I know that you are no stranger to grief. You've walked through profound grief and loss, especially with the loss of your brother, Sam. I just want to start like asking about him. Tell us about Sam.
Yeah, Sam was a worker, just a hard worker, right? I talk about him all the time. He my parents were immigrants. They came over, 50 years ago, and my mom and my dad just had that like work ethic, right? That crazy work ethic. So my dad, graduated college in 2.5 years while working at the Tyson chicken farm. And then, he went on and got his, MBA and CPA. And my mom did the same thing, came through, got her master's, doctorate. She got her doctorate of education while teaching full time and raising 5 kids, right?
Wow.
So it's like, that's my mom. And Sam, like, had that drive. It must have skipped me, right? I love watching TV too much, but Sam had that like drive, walked on, played ball in school, graduated college in, 3 years, spent his fourth year getting his master's, lecturing at a school, teaching some of his teammates on his team. Like he was just a worker. He just cared for people with such like reckless abandonment and compassion and just yeah, one of the greatest humans that I've ever been privileged to know. Just yeah, nobody had a bigger heart, uh, yeah, than Sam.
And so he sounds like such an amazing human, and I'm sure was an amazing brother. You guys were pretty, I remember being struck when I was hearing you tell the story somewhere at how close you were in age, right? How many months apart were you? Or
15
are you?
months.
Yeah, 15.
No, no, 17 months.
Oh,
No, no,
17.
no. Sorry, my math is all off. Which you know, as a former math teacher, my math is all 16 months. We are
Yeah.
16 months apart.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah. My
yeah.
two, Sammy's though my son that transitioned, but Sammy and his younger brother Jackson were 14 months apart.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's, it's close. 14. So you're virgin on Irish twins there, as
Oh,
they
no, no,
call
listen. Yeah, yeah, Lord. It was so close that we figured this out maybe in high school. We were, at Men's Warehouse getting fitted for like prom or a wedding or something.
it.
So Sam goes first and they call out all these arbitrary numbers. And then I go up there.
Neck, your shoulders, your arms, that kind of
Yes.
numbers. Yeah.
And I'm just like, yeah, yeah, 32, 37, like that. Well,
Yeah.
then I go up there and they call out the exact same numbers in the exact same order. And they
Wow.
were like, hey, like, yeah, I mean, like, y'all are the exact same size. Like, both of y'all didn't have to come. One of y'all could have just came and shared it. And me and Sam did that for the rest of the custom suits that we had to get done for the rest of our lives. So that's how close we were. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So it must, I mean, not that any loss of a sibling wouldn't be devastating, but I can only imagine. And I understand it was a sudden loss. Um, and how has that loss and how did that loss shape you? One of the things I've heard you talk about that I'd love for you to work into your answer is because I have had the same experience of this. I think you put it that you almost sort of created this unconscious script where you can almost disassociate from the telling of what happened,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah, 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 yeah. That it's a so the like interesting thing about sibling loss, especially when they're young, is um people's curiosity is different. The younger somebody dies, the more curious people are as to the circumstances surrounding it, right? So if
Yeah.
I tell somebody that my grandmother died, it's sorry for your loss, and they assume there's something. If I say my parents died, it's sorry for your loss. If I say my 32-year-old brother died, it's what happened, right? And so you just kind of find yourself at this place where there's so many questions and uh, you have to talk about it so much, and sometimes you want to talk about it. So I kind of got to a place where early on, right, in order not to break down every time, it was a here is a script. These are the words that I'm going to say. Here's all of what's going to go on. Which, for me, it's like I grew up with an incredibly terrible stutter. So when I first learned how to public speak, it was a lot of spoken word, memorization, knowing exactly what I was going to say, when I was going to breathe, where I was going to breathe. And it felt like the same thing, right? So it's to not to completely fall apart and to be able to get across something that was coherent. For me, it was um, this a narrative, this what went on, and just kind of, I could, say it with my eyes closed. I could say it while riding a bicycle on a tightrope, juggling, right? It's just
Right.
the words that, yeah, Yeah,
Yeah, I have the same thing when people ask how my son died. And every interview I do and every conversation, there's that,
it's the
I'm not
same.
going to make you give me the script.
Yeah,
But
it's
you
okay.
know, they,
Yeah.
there's a script of, how it happened, how you found out what happened,
Mm.
um, and it is something. I know exactly what you're talking about, this kind of I mean, for me, it feels sort of like a rote. It's rote so
Yes,
that
rope.
I can be a little bit numb and disassociated when I tell this extremely loaded story.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
it's one of the things that I feel like, yeah, especially when it comes to like grief, like is sometimes uh the like absolute moral quality or the absolute moral value that people will apply to a thing like numbness. Sorry, excuse me. It's like people tend to be very like words and concepts and thoughts in life just becomes very very flat when people who have not grieved are dealing with their own grief for the first time or somebody else's grief, and so something like that will come up and people will view numbness as a problem to solve instead of saying no, no, wait, there's a couple of ways we want to think about being numb, right? Numbness can actually be a good protective thing, and it is necessary, right? If I go to get a root canal and the doctor says, hey, here, we're not about, yeah, numbness. We don't think that it's good. I'm like, I'm going to another dentist
Yeah.
because there is a time where the pain is so deep and intense that in order to survive, I need a temporary numbing, and that is a good thing. Now, if the numbness is indefinitely prolonged, we call that paralysis, and that's not a good thing. That's not what we want. And so it's just, yeah, grief causes you to have to rethink and to watch all of your words and to be careful about how you talk about, yeah, certain things.
Yeah, and I love that idea of, selective numbness, because there is the old, there's sort of that edict, so to speak, in the therapeutic world of like, don't run from your, and I feel the same way. I feel it's really important not to run from our feelings, and that part of the freedom that, and the healing that can happen through the process of grief is being willing to feel the feelings, and there is a time to be numb.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
there are circumstances where numbness is, very helpful. And it's an evolutionary, it serves an evolutionary purpose. It's key to our survival at times.
100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
So we agree on that. Now,
Okay.
let's talk about the parts that weren't numb, right? How would you, because a lot of this, my purpose in kind of even creating this show is to really shine a light and give people all sorts of ways to navigate through the portal of transformation, really, that I feel grief is. Really, all horrible, traumatic things that happen to
Right,
us.
right, right.
But how has it, and it's an evolution, right? How it's transformed you so far, it's still transforming, right? But
Yeah.
how has it disrupted, dismantled, transformed you?
Oh, in every way imaginable, right? I think of there's one line. Well, there's so many lines. Chimamanda has this short little book called Notes on Grief, where she kind of tracks through, goes through the death of her dad. The book is just, it's worth its weight in gold, and I mean, there's so many lines there. She's one of my favorite authors, and one of the things that she says is how quickly my life has become another life. And that to me is the best line to describe the disruption of grief as something complete, total, earth shattering, that it is not incremental. It is not mild. There is not a downward slope. It is not even uh, evolutionary. It is revolutionary. It is April 14th, 2015. There was a John that had lived on the earth for, 30 years and 9 months, right? April 15th, it is a new person, a different
He's
person.
gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that old person is gone. And so for me, there's lots of things that it did. I think, prior to my brother dying, I was more trusting of people, circumstances, life, God, right? I lived with a type of naive optimism that the inputs of life usually and often match the outputs, right? So you just kind of live within uh, the safety of these cardboard walls that inputs of life match the outputs, and then there is a torrential downpour of sorrow and yeah, trouble that decimates those cardboard walls, and you have to rebuild it from scratch. So I think it rid me of a lot of my naive optimism, but it also like I do go back and I say I think there was innocent and good optimism that even 11 years later I'm still yet to recover, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When the worst possible thing happens for you in your life, right?
Uh-huh.
I feel like there's this awareness of, anything can happen anytime, not just that X, if you do X, Y, and Z, A, B, and C will happen, or vice versa, right? That
Yeah.
life is not going to be a give and take and
Yeah.
or a perfect formula, or any kind of formula,
Yeah.
but that any second everything can change. And I think that's an awareness that when you have, especially with a sudden loss
Yeah.
you weren't prepared for,
Yeah.
that is a huge piece of it.
Oh, it is. And yeah, that is one of the most paralyzing things, right? To um, you know, the lesson that we do learn from tragic sudden losses, the things that should stick with us is, um, yo, death could be around any corner at any time. So, uh, I think the distorted way that I lived and that most grievers, or let me not say most, that a lot who find themselves in the same place is it is a thin line from living like death could be around any corner to like death is around every corner, right?
Mhm.
And so there is a point in time where you just can become so fixated and preoccupied
Yeah,
with it that you fail
anxious.
to live. And I want to protect and I want to make sure you're okay. And each time that my mom calls, my heart drops because it was her call that made me start to call him. And you can like, you know, it it is that tightrope. You don't want to live a life where you forget about your morality or your mortality, because that helps us to live wise, savor every moment. But then
And
again,
say
you
yes to
yeah,
life. Yeah.
yeah, but you don't want to live life where you fixate on it, because that just makes us, shells of ourselves. And yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting balance. And to me, that's been a big part of the healing. Because, I mean, there's certain, it depends on the degree of trauma. And I think it also depends on how much trauma you came to the grief table
Right,
with.
right, right,
Like
right.
how much trauma came before that. Because trauma sure as shit loves an open door.
Absolutely.
Um,
Listen.
but I do think for me that's been such a big beautiful part of the evolution. Not just that when people say to me, especially with child loss, oh gosh, I'm so sorry if that happened to me, or my child, I don't know how I would survive it. I often get that. And
Mm.
my response now is you don't survive it. I did not survive it. The me that I was before my son died is,
It's
she
scary.
is gone.
Yeah.
She,
Yeah.
she did not survive
Yeah.
any more than my son did. And
Yeah.
I think there's extra grief there as you start to come to terms with that, right? That not only the realization, the loss of optimism as you described it, but also the loss of who you were,
Yeah.
and I know you've spoken about the sort of not only the optimism, but the playfulness and the joyfulness. There's elements that just aren't there in the same way. And I think there's a grieving process around that too. While you're simultaneously unwrapping, uncovering, who you are now and the gifts that may be evolving from this,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. 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 That it is not, there is not, um, it's not one note,
Yeah.
right? Like it is uh, you kind of live the rest of your life hearing life played in like major and minor keys, and it's just you just start to learn to embrace it all. Life is not one note. Birthdays from here on out are not um these like uh absolute days of joy like they once were before the loss. Now birthdays are, tainted and tinted by that grief that comes in. Everything in life just has this, um, yeah, this like tint, this aftertaste, this, uh, yeah, just something that makes it different than what it once was. And I think we constantly are coming to grips with how quickly our life has become, yeah, another life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to me, it's been interesting on my journey because like just using the birthday thing, I mean, it could be any milestone.
Yeah.
Some of them 1 year, and there's no order to it, right?
Right.
It's not like it's gotten progressively in one direction. That's
That's
not
it.
how it works. But there have been some birthdays where there's just this very sweet tenderness about it, where that taste is different, right? Some tastes, as you describe it, and I love that idea, like the tinge or the tint or the taste is tender and sweet. Other ones, it's a little bittersweet. Other ones, it's just damn sad.
Right.
It's like just an edge to it, but the edge has different flavors
Right.
each
Right.
time.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah. I don't, it is this, yeah, it's this weird, acquired taste that
Yeah.
you just have to get used to. And people
Yeah.
are like, people, right? When people are like floored by, right? They look at you and they're like, how could you have lost that? How can you still smile, right? It kind of feels like, when I was young and I would see my dad like drink coffee. It's like, how can you drink that and like it? And he was
Yeah.
just like, it's an acquired taste.
It's
I don't know
acquired.
how to explain it.
Yeah.
I know it just seems bitter, but uh, you learn to enjoy the parts that
To embrace it.
can be enjoyed. Yeah. Yeah.
And I love how you mentioned joy because that is something else. And I know you've spoken to this, but for me, I always try to speak to this that one of the things that kind of an unexpected gift from the degree of pain I have felt in my grief is that as I have been willing to feel the fullness of pain that is deeper and greater than I ever felt before, it strangely and unexpectedly, but kind of makes sense, stretched my capacity for joy.
Oh yeah.
So, so the joy I feel now, I don't
Wow.
walk around with the same level of playfulness, innocence, spontaneity, maybe that I did before. But when I feel joy, my capacity for joy has stretched as wide as my capacity for pain.
Yeah, that is it. Yeah, every one of life's pleasures, if we let it, feels so much more precious.
Yeah.
I think there's so much of life that I took for granted before I realized and really learned that, death or the end could be around any corner. That now it's oh no, every one of those hugs for my daughter, right? Every, daddy, you're home. Every time that we're on the couch, it is a reminder that this moment is more like, if you were guaranteed to have this forever, right now it's you could take it for granted here or there, but the fact that we do not know how much longer we have it makes us feel like, oh well, if I don't know how much longer I have it, I want to be sure that I extract every last ounce of joy that comes from here. And so, yeah, our grief in this paradoxical way really does make our capacity for joy greater than
Yeah.
those who have not, yeah, lost in the same way.
I really do find that to be true if you're willing, right? I mean, because there's
Yes.
all kinds of reasons we block joy out of guilt or, you know, fear or other reasons. I love how you've described grief like like black beans or something that doesn't go bad, a
Oh, yeah,
non-perishable food,
yeah, yeah.
because it is.
It is a, yeah, it's a, people just tend to live like you know, time heals all wounds, or grief is a journey, and you'll see the light at the end of a tunnel, and it's like, time doesn't heal all wounds. Time uh, lets you see that what comes after grief is actually more grief. There are infinite ways to grieve that you have not thought possible. There is, like, my brother was a basketball fan. Basketball has been a huge part of my life, and part of why it was a huge part of my life was because of him and the way that he worked at it. And it's we used to, after college, when we had our jobs, we would call in sick or take PTO the first weekend of March Madness. So regardless of where we were in the world, we would take off that time and we would just watch all of those games. And so I think of, like, somebody like Steph Curry that has changed the face of the NBA, or changed basketball as we
Yeah.
know it. And his rise started in the playoffs, April 2015, right after Sam Pat. And so it's like, oh, I love that part. But then whenever I think about that, I get sad. Like, man, Sam didn't have a
Yeah.
chance to, yeah, watch it or see it. Yeah,
Yeah, every milestone, real or cultural or whatever.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think about it. I was just talking to a woman about this recently who maybe is 2 or 3 years out from her loss. And she was like, I was doing really well. And now I have, I feel like, I think the word she uses backslid. I feel like I've backslid or
Mm,
backslided
mm.
because I've been feeling just the, sadness and crying and loss and thinking about him so much. And my position on it is that, like, grief is a never-ending spiral. So
Oh,
you're revisiting the same points on the circle, but from a different position.
that's it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That is an excellent picture because it reminds us that it may have a start where you get on that ramp, but it doesn't have an end, right? Or
Yeah.
it's like, people think that, like, grief and hope are like parallel streets, or like one street that turns into another, right? So yeah, you travel on
Get
grief
off the
for
grief track and you get
25
on hope.
blocks,
Yeah.
and then after
I'm done.
25 blocks it turns into hope, and it's like, no, 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 no. Grief and hope are these winding streets that go back and forth, and they
Yeah.
intersect at these key points, and where sometimes you're on the road of hope and you feel like, oh, this is great, I could be here forever, and you intersect with sadness. And
Yeah.
sometimes you're on the road of sadness and you feel like, I could be here forever, and then you intersect with hope, and it is this yeah, like, you find
Yeah.
yourself at this unique intersection where you realize that you can be both at the same time. you
Yeah. And if you're
you know,
feeling the same feelings, they aren't the same. They're
right,
never the same, right? Like it
right,
may be that there's a new layer to release. It may be that
absolutely,
you're just revisiting something. It may
yeah,
be that your capacity is greater
right,
now. So there's more to like it to me, it's not backsliding, it's evolving. It's an ever evolving experience.
yeah,
So let's talk about, you mentioned hope, which is such an important, I mean, that's, as you said in the beginning, that's what it's all about for you. And I know you're a pastor as well as the millions of other things you are. For me, I grew up with no religious education or exposure, very secular family. As I like to joke, my dad was God, and he was not a very gentle or
mm,
loving God. He was a
yeah,
very scary and punishing
yeah,
one.
yeah, yeah,
Um, so for me, and I think so I want to talk about faith because I
yeah,
know you've spoken about,
yeah,
the seasons of prayerlessness and spiritual
yeah,
numbness.
yeah,
Whether you're someone who had a spiritual practice and faith before, and then of course would make so much sense, feels betrayed by God when
absolutely,
someone you love is taken from you. For those of us like me who never had a level of faith. And I was just starting maybe 7 to 10 years before Sammy died. I had started to have a spiritual, what I kind of call a reawakening, because when I
yeah,
was a
yeah,
little girl, it was there and then it got shut
right,
down. Um, so I was starting to try to seek and to reach for spirit.
hmm,
But it was such an abstract to me. And one of the greatest gifts, and there have been many gifts. I always said, the caveat is take them all back if I could have my boy back. But
oh, absolutely,
but one of the greatest gifts has been that kind, and I see this so often with the hundreds of, thousands of grievers I speak to, that out of that pain, it will make you reach even harder sometimes. Now,
oh,
maybe not if you're pissed at God, but for someone like me, I was like, I'm reaching hard. And then a door opens a little crack, and then you're like, whoa, what's over there? And
yeah,
you step through.
yeah,
And I am finally, because of what happened, entering a kind of two-way relationship with spirit, God, whatever people want to call it. To me, it's
yeah,
kind of holy oneness. But I want you to speak to that because I feel like you're so uniquely, qualified
yeah,
in many ways to speak to the idea of faith and
yeah.
spirit.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, faith has been an interesting thing for me, right? In that, I, so I, faith played a big role in my life as I grew up. I graduated college and immediately went to seminary and started to help pastor a church at 22 years old. And so I pastored from 22 to 38 years old, so 16 years, across two different states, three different churches. And in all of that, it's through all the frustration and the pain and the loss, I still maintain uh, my faith in, Jesus and the fact that, oh no, I believe that, right, that there was somebody who actually rose from the dead, right? So for people can believe what they want to believe. The thing that like drives this belief and this hope and being able to like dive head on into grief is that I really believe that death is not the end of the road, that there is a path towards resurrection, right? And um, so I say all of that to say, in the same way that death like changed the naive optimism, in the same way like death like robbed me, and rightly so, took me of the naive optimism. Death also like crushed whatever like weak, unnuanced faith that I just adapted and adopted from people and really forced it to become my own, right? So there is a C.S. Lewis, right, the great theologian, writer, philosopher, the whole nine. He writes this book called A Grief Observed, where he's processing the death of his wife. And one of the things that he says was that, you know what grief and tragedy do is we come into it and we think that our faith is some like strong tower, but what death and grief does is it exposes to us, not to God, that our
Yeah.
faith really on its best day is nothing more than a house of cards, that it could be blown over and toppled easily, right? And so I think for me, one of the most important things when it comes to faith is, yeah, people tend to spend their time uh, evaluating the amount of their faith, comparing the amount of their faith, cultivating, saying, I need more and more and more. And I think what I've learned is that, oh no, at the times where my faith was at the rock bottom, my faith has been sustained, not because of the amount. I think faith is always about the object. It's just as strong as what you put your hope in. And so from my standpoint, it is a I'm constantly trying to uh, I'm constantly trying to in this season of my life do as much of a demonstration project of my faith as I did an explanation project of my faith when I was a pastor, right? So I spent 16 years, week in and week out, preaching and explaining and word pictures and helping people gather and living and serving in my neighborhood and my community and all of that. And I think at this stage of life, one of the greatest aspects that I've seen of the faith that I have is uh, its buoyancy in the raging waters of grief, right? That um, when you talk about grief and the finality of death and loss and hope and what it feels like to just bury all of your hopes and dreams and to realize like there's a period at the end of that sentence. There is nothing that humanity wants more than to believe that there is some way back, which is why in every soap opera where your favorite character dies,
Yeah.
there is a type of resurrection that takes place. It's like, oh
Yeah.
wait, but he didn't
They weren't
die.
really
He
dead.
was, yo, that was his twin brother, right? That all of these things are, I think they are
Yeah, we want
testifying to the fact.
resurrection.
Yeah. So for me, it's that it is this concept about story, right? That if there is a God and he does exist and he created us to be uh, people that make sense of life by story, it would only be natural that he sustains us and helps us through what I feel like is the greatest story ever told. And so I just constantly want to uh, meet people at the bottom, meet people at life's dead ends, and provide them with what they need, like give them what they need before they give up. That to me
How do
is
you do that? How do you, because you're not explaining faith, as you say, you're kind of demonstrating it and showing it. How do you meet someone? I mean, I always think back, I
yeah,
have my second mama, my spirit mama, Sandra Flowers. May she rest in peace. She was my mom's best friend, but in many ways, both of our mothers.
yeah.
But she would always say to me, all you need, I grew up in the South. So, she'd
Oh
say,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
all you need is a mustard seed, baby.
yeah,
All you need is a mustard seed. And I would just not, I'm all right, salsa, whatever. But I think about that so often now.
yeah,
Just that little mustard seed of faith. That's all
yeah.
you need. But how do you, as as when you're meeting people there, how do you help them connect with that?
All right, well, yeah, yeah. So this is it, right? One of the so I've talked about the merits, I think, of my faith and the way that I think my faith tradition is one that holds something very, very special. But in the same way that I'm going to talk about merits, I think one of the ways that I want to meet people is to talk about maladies and the way that um, certain times, one of the things that I felt as I went through my own grief as a pastor in a church, in a community, was one of the major ways in which I feel like, uh, Christianity or my faith deviates from the spirit of what, like Jesus did when he was on the earth is that, you know, uh, the Bible talks about him as this like man of sorrows, that he was acquainted with grief or fluent with grief, that it was like when people came to him and they were grieving, he didn't say like but hope. He sat with people in their grief and in their pain, and he cried with people. And sometimes I do think that when you have a particular community of faith that is convinced that they have the answer and the solution, they tend to try to solve a particular problem that people are not facing, and they overlook some of the harm that can be done when you export things too quickly. This is what I mean, right? Um,
When you kind of spiritually bypass, or you try to
yeah,
spiritually bypass, and
and
instead you're saying to stay fully present with the pain.
this is what I'm saying. Yeah, that it is not like those things, those statements are untrue. So what I say to folks all the time is like, hey, do you believe this truth with all your heart? I believe the same truth. And it's not about if it's untrue. It's about you can do a lot of harm if it's under true. This is what I mean, right? When you try to rush people towards hope, when they find themselves in the depths of this grief, it is like somebody that is overly eager on the grill serving chicken to a bunch of people.
Yeah.
He's just so excited to fling it out and to get it out that it's by the time folks eat and bite in, it's like, wait a minute, uh, uh, it looks cooked on the outside, but it is undercooked, and anybody that ingests that, they're gonna be harmed and they're gonna throw up and they're going to be convinced in their head, chicken. I don't
Chicken
like.
is bad.
Yeah, chicken. It's like, no. You just don't like undercooked chicken, right? So from my standpoint, it is saying, I think the greatest virtue for both grievers and would-be comforters is the virtue of patience, being able to patiently wait with people as they go through the most harrowing, confusing experience of their lives until another death takes place that eclipses that one. And regardless of how much they've grown and known, they find themselves yet again, right, in that place, right? This is what I tell folks. It's, hey, yeah, I'm writing another book on grief, and I'm done, and I've done all of this work in it. I got a doctorate, and its aim was grief, storytelling, and the cultivation of virtues. And look at all this stuff that I put. However, part of why I could do that is because um, the grief had cooled down enough for me to be able to touch it without gloves. And I also want you to know that as I write all this stuff, I just want to have the permission for, if I go through a devastating loss that I did not plan, I want you to know I'm going to look like the biggest hypocrite, because all the things that I wrote about and how I believe, it's going to be very hard for me to take that truth. And that's just what grief does when it is piping hot. But I just want to surround myself with people that already know that that's going to be the case and will be patient with me and will trust that when that future grief cools to a sufficient temperature, then maybe yet again there's going to be something else that
Level,
comes up
yeah.
or is birthed from it.
Yeah, and I love that. And I love the idea that because what it brings up for me is that even in the most faithful, maybe that's part of the purpose of faith. Like, just like, you know, part of you can't fully experience love without, also understanding fear, right?
Absolutely.
You have to
Yeah.
understand the contrast. You have to have the contrast. And so maybe part of faith is experiencing faithlessness.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's yeah, yeah, Lord, it is this I think so many people think that if faith is a fire, right? Then doubt sorry, if faith is fire, then doubt is wind. Yeah, doubt is not an enemy of faith any more than wind. Like doubt is not an absolute um, opponent of faith any more than wind is an absolute opponent of fire, right? It's all about that wind being aimed rightly, right? And so I feel like that if God is real and he created this all and he knows what's coming and he's big enough to, turn this around and make things uh, to bring good out of it, then I find it highly unlikely that he is surprised by any of the intense emotions that we feel when we go through all of this. And if he's not surprised and he made it, and it's not like this is his first go at it, right? So it's
Yeah.
not like this is the first time he's had to deal with a mother that's lost a son or deal with a brother that's lost a brother and all this stuff that comes up. I'm sure whatever has been said, he's already heard it before. So he's not, right, shocked by it. And so from my standpoint, I think this is where I think doubt the wind of doubt gets redirected and uh, finds itself in a channel that has the capacity to blow and build out our faith. And I think it comes when we, take our doubts to our God, take them directly to him with the most direct um, language possible. And so for me, that was what helped me, right? That was the thing that maybe transformed me, where I got used and accustomed to the very rote way I had to talk to people about my grief and loss. And I just kind of said things and it was very, very rote. And I've just got to do this to survive because I don't like, I'm falling apart and I don't need you to fall apart now daydreaming about what it would be like to be in my spot because you're not right. I don't
Yeah.
want that. And so it was very rote. But I think the opposite took place for me with like um my faith, where it was very uh anything but rote. And I was so surprised by the things that I said out loud,
Yeah.
that I said them and it shocked me because I didn't know that I felt them. But then when I said them, I was like, I may have been sorry for how I said it, but I was never sorry for what it was that I said.
So I would say that it was when I was on my knees, right? Like you hear in the stories of miracles or biblical stories or whatever, like when I was on my knees and I wasn't praying or talking to one of God's representatives, but I was just letting so much pain and rage and anger and helplessness and fury and everything you can imagine roll through me and come through me, and I was expressing it. And it was after those moments when I would have a huge release of emotion, whatever that was,
Yeah.
pain, that I first began to feel grace roll in.
Oh, absolutely.
um, and so it's kind of interesting listening to you speak to it, from someone who had lived in such faith that you were doing the same thing essentially, but just with a more direct route.
Yeah, yeah, well, yeah,
Tired.
yeah. It 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 was a one of the things that I saw was like you know, I think um one of the things that I believe is that every every emotion that we feel, or even every emotional statement that we make about life or the quality of life is ultimately a sentiment or a statement about God, if we believe that there is a God
Yeah.
that controls life, right? So it's like, the person that would say, life is unfair. It's like, if you believe that God controls it all, it's like, yo, God is unfair, right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Just replace it with God. Yeah.
this is what I'm saying. And so what that helped me to do is that I found that in the midst of my grief, I would people would be the objects of my anger. People would be the objects of my frustration. People would be the objects of all of these things. And there's a part of you at first. It's like, I shouldn't be mad. I shouldn't this. Blah blah blah. And I think what I got to was, oh no, like it is okay to be that. I just want to ensure that if my anger is going to reach somebody else, it is going to be a connecting flight, right? So it's gonna go to God for all the, like, it is like, yeah, in this sense, right? God is like the Delta hub in Atlanta, right? Folks know this. Not if
Go to
you go,
God first and then the other
you've got to
person.
go there and then go. Yeah. So that for me is all right. I want to take a direct flight there first, and that's how I like center and ground myself and as things go on. And so in that way, like, that for me is one of the ways that I best feel like I don't just explain my hope, but demonstrate, right, my faith and my hope when people, like, um in conversations that I've had about grief, I've had more and more people than I did when I ever was a pastor, just come up in real life and just say, yo, how, like, what, like, drives you? And frankly, it's a different conversation, right? When it's reactive, in that I just think grief makes everybody curious, and it just
Yeah.
makes us, we just long for, people are like, I do not care what the hell you believe. They're like, I just need something that works for this. And
Yeah.
so
Something to hold on to.
something to
Yeah.
hold on to. And that's all that I'm trying to provide, and to give people a space that may even, shock them as they think of other spaces that they've had in the past where faith has been, where faith has broad jumped over people's humanity en route to try to get them to hope. What I'm saying is, nah, like, we want to be patient and take the time that we need to do the things
Swim
that
in the
we do.
humanity.
Absolutely.
So maybe that's your answer to this question, but let me ask it anyway, because it
Okay.
may not be. For someone who's here with us now, listening, who's in that dark, dense fog of fresh grief or any grief,
Yeah.
what would you want them to know right now?
This is what I would want them to know, Lord. This is what I want them to know. Um, there's three different ways that we see. Um, I think foresight, insight, and hindsight. When it comes to grief, only one of those is 2020 and crystal clear. Every other one of them is confusing, right? So
Mm.
when you find yourself at the beginning of grief, one of the problems sometime with reading so many stories of people that have made their way out to grief is people latch on to the wrong thing. What you're supposed to latch on as you read through that is not like, okay, I see clearly exactly how things are going to work. You don't. You have no clue.
No
There's
foresight.
zero clue. If all you see, it's like your foresight is meant to do what somebody stranded in the ocean does when they see a sea of land and they just see some smudge in the back that may be land.
Yeah.
Foresight is just hope. is there a possibility that there is land? That is what your foresight is to be used for. If you can see a blurred sense of hope there, your
Yeah.
foresight is working as it should, right? Insight, people tend to think that the present is the best place to look. And so then they get to a place and they see how things work together, and they imagine their Sherlock Holmes, that they're going to, all right, I'm going to solve
I'm
this
going to
puzzle.
hack
I'm going to see
this.
how. And
Yeah.
you are not. I
Yeah.
guarantee you are not. We just aren't smart enough. The present doesn't have all of the data. What you do in the present is you gather clues. I was in LA last week talking to Tembi Locke. I've seen
Hmm.
that you talked to her.
Yeah, she's great.
Her book is beautiful, and as I sat and talked to her, I'm like, yo, Tembi, so much detail. Like, how did you remember all of that? And one of the things that she says was, John, it is so crazy. I journaled, I took pictures, I did all of that so that, and when it was time to write the book and I'm trying to go back, she's like, I went back to the pictures, I went back to this. And the present is just gather
Yeah.
things. And then
And for me, it was like 5 minutes at a time, girl, just
just,
five
that's it.
minutes.
That's it.
Don't think beyond that.
That is it.
Yeah.
And hindsight is where, things start to make sense. I mean, I tell the story often because it's the clearest picture. April 14th, 2015, my brother took his final breath. It was sudden, it was quick, it was the worst day of my life. Before you have a chance to barter with God and stuff like that on the worst day of your life, things move so quickly that you get the news before you even find out that you need to ask God for help. And so I was convinced that April 14th would just continue to be the worst day of my life for as long as I lived. And 2 years later, my daughter, who had been born premature and who had not breathed on her own, the doctor takes the breathing tube out of her mouth. And 2 years later, 2 years to the day my brother took his last breath, my daughter
Mm.
takes her first unassisted breath. And it all
Wow.
took
I just
place
got
on,
chills.
listen, and all of that took place, which was, yeah, special for me. Some other people may not think that it is. All that took place on Good Friday, the day that,
Mm.
yeah. Um, so for me, that was just kind of this like small wink, which it's, Lord, I do not remember much of the 2 years between that time. I just remember being filled with frustration and angst, and my
Yeah.
foresight was unclear. My insight didn't make any sense. My faith was a house of cards that I was trying to pick up, and I was convinced that, yeah, that uh, nothing makes sense, nothing's worth it. I was on the wrong side of every door, and in an instant, on that day, it was like that gave me lenses to look back at the past 2 years and to be like, oh, yeah, maybe there is um, a source of hope. Maybe I can look forward to the future and
Mm.
imagine that more of these serendipitous providences are going to occur, and it's going to be more than a coincidence. Maybe there's somebody that's in control of this thing. And for me, it's oh, no, yeah, yeah, that is how I hold on to hope. And without that, right, it is um, I wouldn't be able to do the work that I do. I know there's lots of
Yeah.
other people that can, but it's like that is how I hold on to it, and I
The
unashamedly,
foundation.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for yeah, me.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I could keep talking to you forever. There's
Oh,
so much I wanted to ask you, but I want to just thank you so much
oh yeah.
for your time and for your wisdom and for all that you do for the world. I know you have a beautiful community uh, sort of initiative called the We Go On organization,
Yes,
right?
yeah, 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 yeah. So,
So anything, tell us about that really quickly
okay.
and anything we can tell people about how to find you and
Yes.
how to learn more.
Yeah. So for the past few years, we wanted to create the most beautiful space that people would ever be in as it related to grief and to loss. So we created what was called the We Go On tour. So, I mean, it started off with, 5 cities, 500 people in 2022, where we went to Houston, Dallas, LA, DC, and Atlanta. And we had an evening of, music and coffee and storytelling and film, and just created a space where people could linger long enough to realize that, hope is clinging, right, to the roots of that grief. And we plan to just do that one time, and at the end people were like, can't wait for you to come back next year, and you should
come
go here.
back.
And so in the past few years, I mean, it's been 40 cities, 10,000 people. And so we've just launched it into a nonprofit called We Go On Studio, where our aim is like, we just want to meet people at life's dead ends, right, with beauty, authenticity, and story, to give people what they need before they give up. And that's so we've got a slate of gatherings, right, a 13-city tour that we're going to do this spring, and a podcast project launching, products, resources, and a whole host of things to help everyday people learn to be fluent in the language of grief, to be able to speak the language of grief with an accent of hope. So that's what we're trying
Amen.
to do.
Speak the language of grief with an accent of hope. And speaking of hindsight, this is one of the most beautiful things that also is one of the biggest faith builders in me. It comes up all the time in my work in the world. It comes up in my own life. It's so present here in this conversation, is that everything we are and we do is leading us to where we end up.
Absolutely.
When you think about like your history as a pastor, and your ability to speak to power and to, go from stuttering to speaking to power and telling stories, and so comfortable on the stage, and, building that magnetism that you now are, continuing to do a version of preaching, but you are also using all that came before, set you up to create this movement that you're spearheading now in such a beautiful way. It's just one more reminder of the grace that's there for every single one of us. I think that's really beautiful.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your time and wisdom with us. And we'll put all of it in the show notes, all the links.
Okay.
And I'm going to come when you're in LA. I'll come.
LA is one of our favorite cities to come to. We'll be there. We're finalizing venue stuff right now, but I will let you know when we're out there.
I will be there with bells on and bring a whole crew of grievers with me.
Yeah, bring them.
All right.
All right, Laura.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for listening and crying out loud with me. If something you heard today helped or made you feel less alone, please follow, share, and review. And for more tools and a community that deeply understands you and your pain, visit the Grief Healing Collective at drlauraberman.com/grief healing. I'll see you next time on Crying Out Loud.
There's a hollow in my chest where your laughter used to be. Space at every table, an empty seat I see. The woman I was before you left didn't make it through, but love is still alive in me and still there between us two. They say just let it be alright. Just keep your pain inside. But love this deep and pain this true were never meant to hide. So I'm crying out loud, I'm not holding it in. I'm shrinking my heart for the shape I am in. If grief is the echo of love that resounds, then I will warm you crying out loud. Ooh. Some days grief's a tsunami. Some days it's just a wave. Some days I'm barely breathing. Some days I feel so brave. But I am learning slowly what the breaking's about. The only way to freedom is feeling it out. Every tear that hits the ground is not a sign I'm weak. It's the sound of love still reaching, still learning how to speak. So I'm crying out loud, let the whole world see. Love didn't leave, it's alive in me, and the dark's a doorway if you let it be found. We don't heal by hiding, we heal crying outside. Oh, what if the ache is holy? What if the wounds to go? What if the heart that's shattered can love even more? I'm softer in the tender places, fiercer where I stand. Grief didn't end my story, remade who I am. So I'm crying out loud when my hands unbound, not apologizing for the tears I found. If this is the cost of a love so proud, then I will live in